Shalom, y'all. It's your boy Yosef in Ysrayl, back in the building. I wanted to do a message about finishing off the curse of Deuteronomy, but I need to stop for a second and look at the end time prophecies, especially in this year 2020 where everything is crazy. About 2,000 years ago, Yeshua rebuked the religious elites of his day. He criticized them for their failure to recognize his coming. He told them, you know how to look at the sky and predict the weather, but you don't know how to recognize the signs of the times. Matthew 16, 1-3. Just like you and me, the religious leaders could see dark clouds on the horizon and know a rainstorm was on its way. In the same manner, Yeshua said they should have seen the signs and prepared for survival, prepared for the arrival. The Pharisees and Sadducees knew the Old Testament messianic prophecies, yet they failed to recognize the Messiah. But their failure is relevant to our day and time as well. Why? Because Yeshua wasn't simply addressing the Pharisees and Sadducees when he said this. He had a second audience in mind, you and me. That's right. Yeshua was also talking about our generation. The Bible is filled with prophecies about the second coming, and Yeshua commanded us to watch for him. Mark 13, 35-37. Our generation is also expected to recognize the signs of the times. But are we? Do you recognize the signs of the times? The world is complacent. Unfortunately, much of the world, including a large number of Christians, Jews, Hebrews, are not watching for Yeshua. They're asleep when it comes to the second coming, even though Yeshua warned against it. Why do I say the world is asleep? Because right now, a flood of signs surround us. Never before have so many signs of the second coming been present. Here are just a few from 2020. COVID-19. Since emerging in Wuhan, China, in late 2019, COVID-19 has wreaked havoc on the world stage. It first led to the shutdown of several major cities in China. Eventually, the shutdown spread to the rest of China, then Italy, Spain, the United States, and countless countries throughout the world. While many nations have made inroads to flatten the curve and even force a decline in new cases, the coronavirus is far from gone. This thing don't want to leave. Many fear a second wave, while others argue the first wave never went anyway. While some local areas may have temporarily seen a decline in case counts, the number of new confirmed global cases has grown from 2 million in mid-April to over 8 million today. That's a fourfold increase in 2 months, y'all. Far from being in the rearview mirror, the coronavirus pandemic is still an ongoing global emergency, a form of pestilence. It's one of the signs Yeshua told his followers to look for. Luke 21:11. Global riots. In late May, the murder of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police officers sparked nationwide protests in the United States. Unfortunately, alongside countless peaceful protests, riots erupted in several cities. Minneapolis saw several days of riots, looting, and burning buildings. Following Floyd's death, in Seattle, the police and National Guard have abandoned 6 city blocks in the downtown area, ceding control to various radical groups. In Atlanta, rioters attacked the global headquarters of CNN. In London, authorities boarded up a statue of Winston Churchill to protect it from those threatening to tear it down. Throughout the world, we see images of arson, looting, and mayhem. As the spirit of lawlessness prevails, the Bible said this is what people will be like in the last days. Juneteenth, we also saw countless murders, rioting, a global depression. Despite all the talk of a V-shaped recovery for the economy, no such thing is happening. No such thing is happening, y'all. The global travel industry is a fraction of what is in early January, and it will likely be years before we see travel return to the old normal. You know, a lot of people want to go places. We want to get out of here. We want to grab our passports, but you know, travel industry is shook. Travel industry is shook right now. Last week, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development estimated global GDP could plummet as much as 7.6% this year, twice what it previously announced in March. The World Bank estimates global GDP will fall 6.2%. If these figures are correct, the current economic downturn will be twice as bad as the Great Recession and the worst economic contraction since the Great Depression. Last week also brought bad news on the employment front. More than 1.5 million people in the United States filed new unemployment claims. This is after most states have reopened their economies. To put this number in perspective, prior to March, the largest weekly unemployment claim number in U.S. history was 695,000 in October 1982. Even with many people returning to their jobs following state restrictions, continuing unemployment claims remain over 20 million. This is the worst global economy since the Great Depression, y'all. And it doesn't look like it'll get any better anytime soon. This creates fertile ground for the rise of a dictator. The Great Depression paved the way for Adolf Hitler. The Bible says a similar economic catastrophe will pave the way for the Antichrist. Revelation 6:5-6. Swarms of locusts. Let's look at that. This year also saw the emergence of one of the worst locust plagues in decades. Swarms of billions of locusts ranging anywhere from 1/3 of a mile to 100 square miles or more have attacked crops on 2 continents. The hardest hit areas so far have included East Africa, Kenya, Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, Uganda, Ethiopia, the Middle East, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, Southwest Asia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization projects these swarms will continue to thrive and spread well into late July. As these locust swarms destroy crops, millions face the prospect of famine in parts of the world where food insecurity is highly irregularly or not even that much common. Famine is one of the signs Yeshua said to look for, Matthew 24:7. Rumors of war, let's look at that. On July 1st, the Israeli government will formally consider annexation of large parts of the West Bank. If it does, Jordan has said it will end its 27-year-old peace treaty with the Jewish state. The Palestinian Authority has said it will end its relationship with Israel, and Hamas has warned any such annexation will ignite a new intifada. If Israel moves forward with plans to annex all of part of the West Bank, it will almost certainly face widespread condemnation in the international community and violent resistance from its longtime enemies. Only time will tell what July brings, but rumors of war are widespread. Yeshua said rumors of war will be another sign of his coming, Matthew 24:6. But these are just the latest signs. Many of the signs Yeshua and the prophets said to look for appeared long before 2020. Generations of believers lived and died without witnessing a single sign of the second coming. Yet our generation is witness to all of them. Pay attention. Those signs include Israel back in the land. Yah promised to bring the Hebrew people. Watch this, y'all. Yah promised to bring the Hebrew people back in the land of Israel before he returned. Jeremiah 23:7-8. He said he would call them from among the nations. Ezekiel 39:28. From the farthest corners of the earth, Isaiah 11:12. And from north, south, east, and west, we coming. Psalms 107:3. He promised to welcome them home from the lands where they were scattered. Ezekiel 20:34. What do we hear today? We hear other countries in Ghana and other places saying, come home, come home, come home, Israel, come home, Hebrews. We know y'all don't belong there. When they did, he promised to return and establish his everlasting kingdom. Isaiah 11 through 12. Israeli control of Jerusalem. Yeshua said armies would surrender Jerusalem, destroy the city, and enslave the citizens. Oh, let me backtrack. We have Hebrews there already. We had Hebrews back in Israel since 1970, probably before that, with Aliyah, with the coming of Aliyah. So our people have been going back there for a minute now, since 1970. So check this. Israeli control of Jerusalem. Yeshua said armies would surround Jerusalem, destroy the city, and enslave its citizens. This happened in AD 70, when the Roman legions did exactly that. Yeshua then said people other than the Hebrew people would control Jerusalem for a time. Then the Hebrew people would once again control Jerusalem. When they did, Yeshua promised to return. Luke 21, 24 through 28. Since 1970, the Hebrew people have been living in Jerusalem. Did you hear me? Since 1970, the Hebrew people have been living in Jerusalem. The gospel preached, they've been living in Dismona. The gospel preached throughout the world. When asked about the end of the age and the signs of his coming, Yeshua said the gospel will be preached throughout the entire world. Every nation will hear it. Then the end will come, Matthew 24:14. For centuries after the crucifixion, his death on a tree, the gospel was confined to a small area surrounding the Mediterranean Sea. In the past 2 centuries, believers have brought the gospel to every nation in the world. Today, missionaries live in every nation. The Bible is translated in hundreds of languages, and the message of Yeshua is sent around the world by radio, TV, satellite, and the internet. Our generation is literally on the verge of spreading the gospel to every person on earth. Increased travel and knowledge. Let's look at that. Since hundreds of years before Yeshua, an angel gave Daniel a special message. He said travel and knowledge will increase in the end times. Daniel 12:4. For centuries of human history, dramatic gains in travel and knowledge did not take place. Yet the last 200 years have seen explosions in the speed and frequency of travel, as well as the amount and availability of knowledge, y'all. Arrival of the exponential curve. Let's look at that. Yeshua said a variety of global signs will come before his return in the end of the age. These signs will be spiritual, natural, societal, and political in nature. And he said they will appear in a distinct way, like birth pains, Matthew 24:3-8. This means the frequency and intensity of these signs will increase as we near his return. Our generation has seen the exponential increase in war and famine. Yeshua said to look for. In the 20th century alone, more people died from war and famine than lived on the earth when Yeshua spoke these words. Israel surrounded by the enemies. The Bible said enemies will surround Israel in the end times. Those enemies will say, "Come, let us wipe away the nation of Israel. Let's destroy the memory of its existence." Psalms 83:4. And let us take for ourselves these pasture lands of Yah. Psalms 83:12. Ezekiel said Israel's neighbor will say, "Yah has given their land to us." Ezekiel 11:14-17. And Israel and Judah are ours. We will take possession of them. What do we care if Elohim is there? What do we care if Elohim is with them? Ezekiel 35:10. Ever since the robbing of Israel in 1948, ever since the robbing of Israel in 1948, the daily headlines have included these Bible verses. Israel's Muslim neighbors claim the land of Israel for themselves, and they have no regard for the Ashkenazi Jews of Israel. Israel's exceedingly great army. Let's look at that. Ezekiel said in the end times, Israel will field an exceedingly great army. Ezekiel 37:10. Zechariah said, Israel would be like a fire among sheaves of grain, burning up the neighboring nations. Zechariah 12:6. And even the weakest Israelite soldier will be like David. Zechariah 12:8. Rise of the Gog and Magog alliance. Let's look at that. The Bible says a military alliance that includes Russia, Iran, Turkey, and a number of Muslim nations will attack Israel from the north. Ezekiel 38:15. Ezekiel 39:2. In the later days, Ezekiel 38:8. When Yah brings his people home from among the enemy nations, Ezekiel 39:27. Today we see those very nations forming an alliance that has never existed in world history. And all three have troops in Syria, a nation on Israel's northern border. Rise of United Europe. Let's look at that. The Bible says a revived Roman Empire will come to power in the end times. Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Revelation 17. According to Daniel, it will be a 10-nation alliance of weak and strong nations. Some parts will be as strong as iron, while other parts will be as weak as clay. Daniel 2:42. We see the beginning of this alliance in the European Union, a coalition of weak and strong nations struggling to stay together. The rise of global government. The Bible says a single government will rule the world politically. Revelations 13:7. Religiously, Revelation 13:8. And economically, Revelations 13:16 through 17. In the last days, it will rule over all people, tribes, and languages on the face of the earth. Revelation 13:7. Its authority will be so complete, no one will be able to buy or sell anything with its permission. Y'all see this coming. Revelation 13:16 through 17. For centuries, a true global government was impossible. Today, world leaders openly discuss it. And cryptocurrency and electronic banking foreshadow an economic system where people can be shut off from commerce, y'all. Pay attention to what's going on. This is End Time Prophecy 2020. Denial of the signs. Let's look at that. Almost 2,000 years ago, Peter issued a warning. He said in the last days, people will mock the idea of Yeshua returning. They will make fun of those who believe in the second coming and say things like, I thought Yeshua was coming back. What happened to his promise? Generation after generation has said he's coming. Yet since the beginning of the world, everything has remained the same. 2 Peter 3:3-4. This is exactly what we hear people say today. Given all these signs, you can be certain of one thing. Yeshua is coming. And ours is that generation that will witness his return. Let me say it again. Ours is that generation that will witness his return. How can I be so sure? Simple. All these signs of conversion. Yeshua said when you see the signs come together, you can know his return is near. When you see the signs come together, you can know that his return is near. In fact, he said the generation witnessing these signs will not pass away before he returns. Matthew 24:34. Keep in mind, for 1,878 years of Christianity, AD 70 through AD 1948, none of these signs were present. Today, all of them are. That means Yeshua is right at the door. Matthew 24:33. As in the days of Noah. Let's look at that. When the disciples asked Yeshua to describe the signs of his coming and the end of the age, he pointed to many signs. But one of the most overlooked is the idea that when he returns, the world will be like it was in the days of Noah. Yeshua said in those days before the flood, the people were enjoying banquets and parties and weddings right up to the time Noah entered his boat. People didn't realize what was going to happen until the flood came and swept them all away. That is the way it will be when the Son of Man comes. Matthew 24:38-39. Look around. Despite all the chaos and turmoil, people are living their lives as if everything is normal, as in the days of Noah. They don't realize what's coming. Noah's generation didn't think the flood would come, but it came. Our generation doesn't think Yeshua will come, but he will. And all of the signs say he'll come in our generation. This is Yosef ben Ysrayl for the House of YHWH. We know who we are. We know who he made us to be, and we are rising from the ashes. And a side note, I released Yahweh Forever 3. Check out the website, YahwehForever3.com. We have a bunch of clothing on there and supplies. the Classy Hebrew. We also have the Yahweh Forever Helping Hands. Those clothes specifically go towards, all the profits specifically go towards helping those in need. Okay, so we have 3 different divisions of clothing on that site, and one specifically goes towards helping people in need. Okay, we don't spend anything from it. All right. Once again, check me out on Instagram, both of my pages, Yosef in Ysrayl and Yahweh Forever 3. Check me out on Facebook. Join in. Help wake the people up. Love you. Shalom.